fundamentals of eating. And so let's dive right into the information so that you can walk away with some really good pearls of wisdom. And that's what we really want to share with you. Now, when we're talking about eating foods, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, so to speak. And as you put food into your mouth, there is a you ingest the food, there's a process that takes place. When you eat that food, you have to understand that the digestion begins not in the tummy, it begins in your brain. Now, why do I say that? Well, because when you prepare your mind and you're in the right mindset, then your body begins to release enzymes, release digestive juices. Have you ever been in a situation where you smelled some apple pie cooking in the oven? You actually start to salivate. Well, that's the mind and the senses recognizing that delicious apple pie is coming. And by the way, here on the other side of medicine, we are all about eating good carbs, carbs from heaven. And so you can eat apple pie, and we recommend making it with wholesome ingredients. You don't have to deprive yourself. You can eat those foods that you've loved your whole life and you found as comfort foods, but they need to be eaten with good, wholesome ingredients. So if you make an apple pie, you can make it with whole grains. If you're gluten-free, there's a lot of gluten-free flours. If you're not, you can have whole grain pastry flour or combine it with other grains as well to make it light, delicate, and delicious. So sugars, you would use either honey or coconut sugar or some other sugar like date sugar that you can use in place of the cane sugar and the refined sugar. We really want to use whole foods here on the other side of medicine. So this is a delicious experience, my friends. You don't have to deprive yourself. We want to teach you how to be able to eat healthfully and be able to enjoy a good, long life and live an independently healthy life. That's what we're all about. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the next stage. That's when it goes down inside the tummy. Now you're going to begin the digestion process. And we're going to get into a little bit deeper into that. But there's the stages of development of the food going through the digestive system. It gets into the stomach, and then a bunch of things take place there. Once the food leaves the stomach, it goes into the small intestines, and then there are some other things that happen there. We'll talk about those in detail. And then that's where absorption occurs. Once the absorption occurs, it then transfers over to the large intestine, and that's where the bolus of food, which by this time has become sludge, is now going to get reconstituted with water. And that's where you have to have a lot of water in your daily intake, because in the large intestine, water is reabsorbed into that bolus of the broken down food, which by that time, incidentally, is mostly bacteria and water. And then, of course, then you eliminate the food if you have healthy digestive system. So let's move on into the patterns of how we eat in our lives, or where do we learn those from? It's a learned process. If we're eating healthy foods, we have learned that somewhere. If you're eating unhealthy foods, you'll learn that somewhere. And so here in this country, unfortunately, most people have learned to eat the standard American diet, which is abbreviated SAD for short. It's very sad. It's very deprived of nutrients and loaded with toxic elements. And so here on the other side of medicine, we encourage you to avoid the foods that have been adulterated by the food processors and to eat the foods that God has created as close as possible so you can get the maximum benefit what God has stored inside of those food. There is just a bountiful mountain full of richness inside of each bite of the foods God has created, filled with nutrients, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, phytochemicals. All these things are they're medicines. Food is your best medicine. So where you learned how to eat is really important to understand, because if you learn the wrong habits, you can unlearn them and then move into a new direction. I personally had to move away from eating garbage, American standard junk food. I was just like everybody else, hooked on the average American processed foods. Although my parents taught me to eat healthy, I kind of deviated away from that. You know, you get peer influence, and we've all been there. We get busy, and we don't consider ourselves when we're young to have to worry about health issues because we're invincible. But as we learn, as we grow older, and sometimes even when you're younger, we start to have illness starts to creep in, and we have problems start to develop. And unfortunately, in our country, when people, even at a young age, get sick, either their parents or the young adult goes to the doctor, takes their child, or you go to as a young adult, the doctor prescribes medicines and doesn't really talk about lifestyle, doesn't talk about what foods are going to keep you healthy. That's a no-no. We don't encourage that. We literally help you to change your mindset so that you can start eating healthy and enjoying the blessings of good health that God has intended for you. So we really want you to think about, to contemplate where you learned eating. Now, mindful eating is what we talk about here on the other side of medicine. It's developing a healthy relationship with the food that you eat. You see, our relationship with the food is going to pay us back in how those foods make us feel. So when you eat healthy foods, the foods that you eat, that relationship you have with them, those foods are going to love you back. And you're going to have a good experience. You're going to have energy. You're going to have clear thinking. You're going to have good digestion. All the things that most people would love to have, but because they're not eating mindfully, then they start to experience dis-ease. The ease and the peace that we had when we were babies starts to melt away, and we start developing dis-ease. We start having symptoms. We start taking medications, and we start complicating our whole systems with these toxic elements from medications. And then, of course, when things get worse, the doctors will then turn you over to a surgeon. And then that is even worse. So we want to prevent those things, and we want to minimize those things. And we can do that if you're willing to take a proactive role in your health. So mindful eating is something that we encourage. And as you develop a relationship with food, just as if you were developing a relationship with a friend or your husband or wife or your children, when you have a good relationship, those people in your life are going to love you back. And when you have a good relationship with the food that you eat, the foods are going to love you back, and you're going to experience vibrant, energetic, like a health that's going to be long lasting as well. So that's what we want to do. Now, mindless eating on the opposite end of the spectrum is what the average American is doing every single day. They don't think very much about what goes into their body, other than the fact they want something that tastes good, that's convenient, and oftentimes is cheap. In America, we spend a lot of money on our homes, on our cars, on our clothes. But when it comes to our food, we look for cheap. That doesn't make very much sense. And I hope that you would stop and ponder that for a minute, because if you don't take care of this body, this temple of the Holy Spirit, then you are going to have consequences. You're going to have to suffer the consequences. So, wouldn't it make good sense to invest in healthy foods just as you do with taking care of your automobile? Take care of your body in the same respect and put in the best quality of fuel for your body that you would at the same time put in your car or any other type of machine that you have. You want to put the best, the quality, keep it the oil clean and the gas that don't have any contaminants in it, like water or anything else. Your body is much more sensitive than a car. You want to take care of it and put the best, the highest quality ingredients inside of your body. So when you eat the foods that are a standard American diet, for example, that are adulterated foods, that are processed foods, they're not going to love you back. They're going to start causing symptoms inside of your body. Indigestion, those are some of the first signs of indigestion, heartburn, and diarrhea or constipation. Those are some of the telltale signs that chronic disease is doomed. You're doomed for chronic disease, and it's impending. And if you don't do something about it, it's going to eventually emerge in your life. It doesn't have to be that way. So we really want you to not have the mindless eating, which is eating foods that will end up taking you to the grave much sooner than what God has planned for you. Remember, we have been given rational minds. We have to make good decisions. So let's talk a little bit about when you should be eating and how you should be eating that food that when you sit down to that dinner hour. Now, the first point I want to make here is that it's very, very important that when you sit down to a meal, that you are not in a hurry, that you're in a happy place. I always tell people, when you're ready to eat, go to your happy place, because it's so important that you're not eating when you're upset, when you're not angry, when you're not depressed, when you're not feeling uptight. You don't want to eat during those times. You want to eat when you're relaxed. You want to eat when you have a time to sit down and just enjoy family, friends, or even by yourself. Just enjoy the quiet time, the peaceful time. Maybe put on some soft music, some Christian music or some classical music. Perhaps you can watch a movie that is not violent. You don't want to watch a violent movie. You want to watch maybe a comedy or something that has a positive impact in your life. This would be the time that you would just sit down, relax, and be able to enjoy the dinner hour. It's very important. So don't eat when you are disturbed by anything. Being anxious or disturbed or in a hurry is not any good for digestion. Many times you can get rid of the indigestion and the acid reflux just by following a couple of these simple rules that I'm sharing with you right now. So, eat in a relaxed state. Make sure that when you eat, that you chew your food really well. My rule of thumb is this, that your solid foods should be chewed till they become a liquid. And your liquids should be chewed as if they were a solid. Very important, very, very important, because most people bolt their foods like an animal. I see people going in restaurants and filling up their plates to the brim. And then 15 minutes later, 10, 15 minutes later, they're going back for another full plate. My friends, that is going to cause an explosion in your stomach. That is going to cause all of the problems that people are taking Tums and other types of antacids for, and other types of over-the-counter medications to quiet down the tummy. Don't want to do that. Chew your food well, That one simple rule will make a huge difference no matter what you're eating. I promise if you eat your food slowly and masticate the food, it's going to digest better and you're going to have better overall health of the gut. Also, when you're eating, the foods don't have a lot of liquid. The only liquid that I would recommend is some water or maybe some herbal tea. Herbal teas oftentimes will help with the digestion, like ginger tea or peppermint tea or chamomile tea. Those will help to soothe the tummy. Now, I wouldn't recommend drinking a lot of those teas, a lot of volume. I would say, if anything, maybe have 3 or 4 ounces, and that's it, just to kind of wet your whistles and maybe help the food go down a little bit. But if you're chewing your food well, you won't have to drink a lot of liquid. And if you're eating a lot of food that has a lot of water, like whole, raw fruits or vegetables, again, you won't need a lot of water. So, my rule of thumb is to have at least 50% of your plate at every meal is either fruits, fresh fruits, not cooked, not canned, not processed in any way, just fresh fruit, and have 50% of your plate with fresh fruit or fresh vegetables that are raw. Uncooked vegetables or uncooked fruit is loaded with water. And if you chew it well, you'll wet your whistles and you won't have to drink a lot. Promise it'll make a huge difference. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that I want you to eat at least 50% of your foods that are going to be uncooked. And I'll tell you why. But before we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about setting the table, getting the mindset right, because we don't want to overlook that. Too oftentimes, people are not following these fundamental rules. As a result, they have a plethora of digestive disturbances. So these simple rules, you don't want to just take them lightly. Eating the food slow is important, but also eating only to satisfaction. Now, when you get hungry, that is the time that you should eat. Oftentimes, people eat when they have breakfast time at a certain time, they have lunch at a certain time, they have dinner at a certain time. They have these patterns that they have in their life. I am not a proponent of that at all. Number one rule is always eat when you are hungry. That's the most important. Eat when you're hungry. You've heard me talk about the blue zones many times. And the people in the blue zones, the healthiest populations on the planet, many of them have a rule that they only eat to about 80% of fullness. So in other words, they're not even reached the point of fullness. They're just 80%, and then they stop eating. That's a good rule. But the first rule is only to eat when you're hungry. If you eat when you're hungry, then you're going to be able to get a much better digestion and elimination instead of eating throughout the entire day. Oftentimes, people will have 3 meals and then snack in between, never giving their digestive system a rest. That's not good for digestion at all. When you eat when you're hungry, then your body is going to be able to get the nourishment that it needs if you follow the principles that we're talking about here. Eating the foods that God has created, eating in the right mood, eating at the right times, chewing your food well. All these things cannot be talked about enough. If I talked about eating in that manner for a half hour to get it through your mind, so you would start that habit every single day, it would improve your digestion exponentially. So please Don't take these things lightly. I promise it will make a huge difference in your life. So let's review. Eat when you're hungry. Eat only till you're satisfied, not till you're full. Chew your food well. Make sure that you're eating in a relaxed environment. The environment should be happy. Go to your happy place. Be around amongst friends. Eat slow. Don't be in a hurry. These are all fundamental rules that you should follow, and don't drink a lot of liquids. These simple fundamental rules, again, will make a huge difference for you. I promise you do them every single time that you sit down to a meal. Now, the next thing that's important to understand is that we should be eating simple meals. Too often, people, as I watch people in restaurants, especially, and not only that, but when I go to people's and visit at people's homes, they have this huge feast at every single meal with so many different categories of foods that are literally causing, again, a definite disturbance inside the digestive tract, an explosion. Simple meals will be easier on the digestive process. What do I mean by simple meals? Well, let's talk about what a not a simple meal is. So let's talk about people who have, let's say, for dinner, they'll have some potatoes and a vegetable, and they'll have some kind of protein, whether it's meat or fish or beans or something of that nature, as a protein. And then they'll have maybe some fruit mixed with that. And then they'll have a dessert, maybe a cake or a cookie or a pie. And then they'll have some tea or coffee or cola. And this is not good for digestion. When you start mixing all those foods, you're going to create a lot of havoc inside your gut. That's not what you want to do. Simple meals are things as I'm going to describe right now. For example, let's say you're going to have pasta for dinner. You could have a whole grain pasta, whether it's whole wheat or it's a brown rice pasta or a quinoa pasta. Any of those pastas are really good, wholesome food. If you're going to have a protein with it, you're going to have something like, for example, some fish, or you're going to have some chicken, or you're going to have some other type of protein that you want to put in there. Maybe some beans, something like that. You can add those, but then some vegetables would be the only other thing that I would suggest at that meal. Maybe some salad. You could have some cut up vegetables. And that's where I would stop right there. Don't add anything more to the meal. Keep it simple. Don't have any dessert. Don't drink a lot of water with it. Just maybe have some little bit of herbal tea or a little bit of lemon water. Keep it simple. And I promise if you follow the other rules that I mentioned, you will find your digestion process will work much more efficiently. And a lot of those things that you thought you had to live with, and a lot of those medications you thought you'd be taking for the rest of your life, you'll be able to throw them down the toilet. That's where they belong, in my estimation, because most of the over-counter drugs are absolutely unnecessary. We have created the need for those things by the improper habits that we have. So keep your meals simple. If you're going to have a breakfast, you could have something like pancakes made with whole grains once again. You could have some fruit with that and maybe some herbal tea and keep it simple. That would be it. Or some oatmeal and some fruit or some toast and some fruit. Keep your meal simple. Maybe some toast and eggs and some fruit, and that would be it. The simpler the meal, the better the digestion, the better the absorption, and the better elimination. All those things are going to work in tandem if you follow these simple rules that I'm sharing with you right now. I hope that you don't take these things lightly because most doctors are not going to share these things with you. When was the last time a doctor sat down and talked to you about these fundamentals of eating? I'll guarantee it that 99% of the people listening to this podcast have never had a doctor talk about any of these things. The average doctor, when you ask them what you should be eating, here's their response: eat a healthy diet. Now, my friends, I could take 10 people, put them in a room, and have them write down on a piece of paper what a healthy diet is, and they all would give a different idea of what a healthy diet is. It'd be all over the board. So that is absolutely a ludicrous suggestion to eat a healthy diet. It doesn't mean anything. It's so varied and so off what is right and real and what is beneficial that you're not going to get anything from that suggestion. So, what I'm sharing with you, though, you can take it to the health bank. You can be assured that what I'm sharing with you is going to make a huge difference in your daily health habits. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these food combining rules, because many people are again combining too many things at one meal. When I go to a restaurant and I see people having fried chicken and they have mashed potatoes and they have, or French fries, and they've got maybe some corn, and then they go in and get some apple pie, and they've got different, Jello salads and whatever else that they put on their plates. It is an absolute digestion nightmare. So keep those food combining rules simple. Don't have more than one protein at a meal. So if you have beans, that would be the protein. If you have fish, that would be the protein. If you have chicken, that would be the protein. And the other thing is, I recommend eating the healthiest foods on the planet according to the healthiest people on the planet. Now, where would you find that? Well, let me talk about the blue zones to you for a minute. Now, if you've never heard about the blue zones, back in 2000, I believe it was like 2010, National Geographic did an extensive study, and they actually brought together a team of scientists, epidemiologists, and cardiologists, and immunologists, and gastroenterologists, and all these physicians. They brought together and they studied the diets around the world from different cultures. And what they did is they did this over a long period of time, and they found 5 regions around the world that were the healthiest populations, that had the longest life of all the people in the world, that had the least amount of chronic disease. Chronic disease was at very, very bare minimum, maybe less than 1% of their population. They had very low incidence of having to use medications or surgeries, and they lived to be, many of them, into their 100 and beyond years. They call these areas the blue zones. And these regions, all of these people, in essence, had a very similar eating pattern. And what they found is that these people ate primarily about 90% or better of their diet was plant-based. 90% or better of their foods they ate were plant-based. They didn't eat paleo, they didn't eat keto, they ate plant-based foods. Now, these people, they had a very similar lifestyle as well. They had strong family relationships. They had a faith in God. They had a strong relationship with God. They had good, solid network of friends that they had their whole lives. They exercised on an average every 20 minutes. They did something in movement in their day. They weren't going to the gym, or they weren't, having a personal trainer. They would just move on average every 20 minutes, working in the garden, climbing up hills, tending the sheep, or picking flowers or herbs. They would walk up hills, and throughout the day they would be doing something active all day long. They also drank minimal amounts of wine every single day. And that was a very common thing that they found as well. They also found time to have prayer and quiet time and de-stress time. So all these things were very common to all those people. But the biggest factor, not to slight those other things, was they ate a plant-based diet. Now, they weren't vegetarians, although a couple of the groups were vegetarians. They ate minimal amounts of animal protein, chicken or turkey maybe once a week, or small quantities every other day, maybe just a little tiny bit of portion. And they ate maybe lamb or beef or pork maybe once per month. And that was it, celebrations or weddings. This was the virtual diet that these people were eating on a regular basis. And the scientists were absolutely astounded of the health of these people. And now the blue zones are all over the internet. You can check them out. And I would also like to share with you about something that is very interesting that I did in my research, which was literally 6 years before National Geographic reported the blue zones and did their documentation in the National Geographic magazine and subsequent books that came out on the blue zones. That was in 2010. In 2004, 6 years earlier, I published a book called Carbs from Heaven and Carbs from Hell. That book pinpointed the blue zones, the regions from the blue zones. I didn't call them the blue zones, but I pinpointed the exact regions with maps of the regions in my book. And I went into a great deal about each one of the cultures inside of that book. That was 6 years before National Geographic had all those scientists create that whole demonstration that they came up with on those blue zones. So I was a pioneer 6 years ahead, pinpointing the blue zones. My friends, that's what I bring to the other side of medicine on this podcast every single week. I bring you advanced breakthrough information years ahead of time because I scour the research. I look and I find information that you're not going to hear from your doctor years ahead of time. I could sit here and tell you about so many things that I announced on my program 25 years ago that are now just being talked about in the world of nutrition. And many people are now getting excited about these things. I was talking about them 25 years ago. I was talking about the microbiome, which is the healthy bacteria in the gut, 25 years ago. And before the radio, I was talking about the microbiome before it was even on the radio. You see, my goal has always been to bring safe, breakthrough information to my friends, to my family, to my radio listeners, to the readers of my books, because I believe food is the best medicine. You see, I believe God has created our bodies with the capacity to heal itself. And I think that it's a shame that the medicine of today, conventional medicine, does not take advantage of that power that God has put inside the body. I can help you to unleash that power just by coming to this podcast. The things that you will learn will transform your life. So this is important. This is a passion that I have. I want to share that with you. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when the bolus of food goes into your mouth, because that is so important. Remember, I said chewing your food is so important. When you chew your food, you have enzymes literally that are released in your mouth as you're chewing carbohydrates, as you're chewing some rice or some vegetables or some other grain or some beans. When you chew those foods well, you release an enzyme called tylan, which is in your mouth, and that helps to begin the digestion process. And it's slowly breaking down the carbs before it even hits the stomach. Now, when the bolus of food goes into the stomach, that's when we call dissolution, or the food becomes to get into a liquid form, a sludge, so to speak. And as it hits the stomach and starts to have this dissolution process, the food is broken down with digestive enzyme like the hydrochloric acid or the pepsin and other digestive enzymes, it starts to turn into a broken down food or a sludge as it goes through the stomach. And then it starts to get into the small intestines. That's where that bolus of food, that sludge now, starts to get absorbed into the bloodstream. At different portions of the small intestines, which is right here on the slide, we're going to see that at that point, you're going to get the different enzymes also that are going to be released there. Those enzymes that are being released, there are things like pancreatic enzymes and bile that's released from the gallbladder. These digestive juices begin to work on that bolus of food and even break it down more so that things can get absorbed efficiently into the bloodstream. Because ultimately, that's where all the nutrients need to get into the bloodstream and then get distributed throughout the entire body. That's what we want to happen. We want to get good digestion of the foodstuffs so we could have the next part of the process, which is assimilation. So getting the food into the small intestines, that we can have then also bacteria, which is a vital component of the intestinal tract. There are some bacteria in the small intestine, but not very much. There should be beneficial bacteria, but a very minimal amount. Most of the beneficial bacteria is farther down the digestive tract, inside of the large intestine, which is down here. So we have these nutrients that are being, as it glides down the small intestines, we're seeing nutrients, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, amino acids, simple carbohydrates, fats. Those things are being absorbed as it travels down through the small intestine and then gets finally absorbed. Now, that's what I want to talk about for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about absorption, because that is so critical, because you're not just what you eat, you're what we're going to be able to digest and absorb and eliminate. That's what you really are. Because a lot of people, for the longest time, said you are what you eat. Well, there's a partial truth to that, but more truthful is to say we are what we eat, digest, absorb, and eliminate. So that is a critical tiered level of different processes that we need to go through to have health. Absorption is going to take the various nutrients from the intestinal tract, and then as it's going through the different stages, it's going to get absorbed into the bloodstream, as I said earlier. And these nutrients then will be distributed throughout the entire body, to the brain, to the heart, to the liver, to the bones, to the muscles. Every organ, every system of the body needs nutrients to be able to function and have optimal health. So, this absorption process, if it's stifled, if it's inhibited, if it's not working properly, we are going to have problems throughout the entire body. And as we have different genetic makeups, genetic inherited weaknesses, wherever we've inherited the weakness, let's say we have weaknesses in our bones or our muscles or in our liver or our kidneys, that is where disease will begin to manifest. The genetic inherited characteristics that we have are only going to raise their ugly heads if we have improper digestion, improper lifestyle. If we have healthy digestion, if we have healthy lifestyles, then those inherited weaknesses will be turned off. The genetic propensities will be turned off. We have an on and off switch. It's called epigenetics. And we have the ability to turn off those inherited weaknesses by the choices that we make. My friends, we've been told for too long that disease is a result of bad genes, bad germs, and bad luck. That's just bad science. Disease is a result of bad choices. And that's where you come in, because you can take charge of your health and make better choices. So these are again critical elements. The absorption of the food, if it doesn't take place properly, if you don't have enough of the digestive enzymes, remember the digestive enzymes have to be manufactured inside of your body. And what does it take to manufacture them? It takes nutrients. Hydrochloric acid needs nutrients. Pancreatic enzymes need nutrients. Bile needs nutrients. If you don't have nutrients because you're eating depleted American junk food, then you're not going to manufacture the digestive juices in efficient quantities, or they're going to be weakened. So you have to make sure that you're getting proper nutrition and a digestion to get the digestive juices that are going to be manufactured that'll help you to break down the food. My friends, it's all a big circle. Everything we do is interconnected to the food we eat, to the choices that we make, how we eat it, when we eat it, the mood that we're in. All those things, as I said, make a huge difference. I hope that you're starting to get the message. I hope. So the next stage is the elimination stage. Now I want to back up just a minute here because this is so important. When we look at what transpires, the digestion and absorption occur in the stomach and in the small intestines. But elimination begins in the large intestines. And this is where we have most of the bacteria. We have over 100 trillion, I'm going to say that, trillion with a T, 100 trillion microorganisms living inside of our body and on our body. We have about 38 trillion living inside of our gut, mostly in the large intestines. And they should be about 80% good bacteria and only about 20% bad. I can assure you that the average American has a disproportionate of the good and the bad. And they have what we call dysbiosis, or an imbalance between the good and the bad. And they have a lot of harmful microorganisms living inside the gut. And that is going to weaken digestion. The more beneficial bacteria you have, It's going to help in digestion. The more harmful microorganisms you're going to have, it's going to impair digestion. So it behooves all of us to eat foods that have the healthy bacteria. We call these probiotics. And the foods that the good bacteria love are prebiotics. So we need to feed the food that the bacteria loves. And that is carbohydrates, my friends. That is fruits and vegetables and whole grains and the water, especially the water soluble and insoluble fibers. So we got to eat those carbs. Those carbs are critical. They feed the good bacteria. They have phytochemicals, which are medicines inside the food that we are going to talk about in upcoming podcasts. You don't want to miss that because God has put in these compounds inside of our food supply, primarily in plants. Very few phytochemicals are found outside of the plant kingdom, and they're medicines. They protect the plants, but they give us protection as well. The bacteria love that. The good bacteria feed on those. And then when we have the good bacteria, it's going to aid in digestion. By the way, the bolus of food, by the time it reaches down here in the large intestine, is mostly bacteria and water. Now, we need to have a lot of water when the food gets down to the large intestine. So if you're not drinking very much water throughout the day, that's not going to be good for digestion either. It will impair the digestion. The water is going to help because when the bolus of food, by the time it gets down to the large intestines, it needs water to reconstitute it. So it enters into the mouth and into the gut, into the stomach, and it gets to become sludge. By the time it gets to the large intestine, it's more so dried up. And then when it gets to the large intestine, it's supposed to be reconstituted. The water is supposed to be reabsorbed. And if you've got a lot of fiber there, it's gonna suck up that water that you're drinking, and it's gonna reconstitute that, and then it's gonna have proper elimination. If you don't, you're gonna have that constipation occur. And that in that environment, the warm, dark, moist environment in that intestine, that large intestine, harmful bacteria can start to breed and cause toxins because those bacteria, just like we do, they poop and they eliminate toxic waste. We've talked about the toxic waste that those microorganisms eliminate, like lipopolysaccharides, very toxic, very, very toxic, cause plethora of diseases. We want to minimize that. We want to get rid of those harmful bacteria. The more beneficial we have, they can keep the harmful in check. So the water is going to be important, very important. My rule of thumb is that you should be drinking half of your weight in ounces of water. So let's say you weigh 150 pounds. You should be drinking minimum of 75 ounces of water per day. And it should be good, clean, pure, reverse osmosis water. You see, that's what you'll find in rainwater, and that's what you'll find in vegetables is reverse osmosis water. So that's the ideal water because it's got little tiny colloidal minerals in it, and we need those. I don't recommend distilled water, although it's not the most harmful thing on the planet. It's much better than tap water. But the ideal water is reverse osmosis water. So water is the last and most important nutrient you need to have. Very important, so you can have good elimination. Okay, so healthy elimination, you should be eating healthy foods so you can have good elimination. You should be having a bowel movement once a day, minimum. Twice a day was acceptable, it's good, it's fine, but you don't want to have more than, let's say 3 bowel movements a day because now you're starting to get into problems with diarrhea. And that's really as bad as constipation or worse. Because when you have diarrhea, and some people have 5, 10, 15 bowel movements a day, The food is going through your system too fast and you don't get good absorption. You're not getting the nutrients you need because it's going through your system too fast. So the proper elimination time from the time the food goes in the mouth till it comes out the other end is 18 to 24 hours. 18 to 24 hours. That is the best digestion time. You should be having at least a bowel movement a day, and it should be between 18 and 24 hours from the time the food goes in the mouth till it comes out the other day. My friends, the average American has a stool transit time, the time the food goes in the mouth till it comes out the other end. The average American, listen to this, has a stool transit time between 48 and 72 hours. That's absolutely insane. And I've heard doctors, educated doctors, tell their patients that having a bowel movement once a week may be healthy for them. I've heard where people having bowel movements every couple of weeks is not any kind of concern for doctors. I've had patients that come in and were having bowel movements once a month, and they were so constipated that we had to do colonic irrigations on these patients. This is where we have water put into their system and we flush out their colons. That is something that is not what should be done to the average person. God has built the body to be able to have a bowel movement every single day. If you're eating the foods we're talking about, that is what will happen. Now, my friends, I have a book that I want to share with you. I have a book that I've written, and this book I'm going to give it to you for free, and it gives you all the instructions to test your stool transit time, but I give you lots of information on how to be able to improve your digestion and what to look for in the different type of stool samples that we can have. I explain the different type of stool. There's actually a chart called the Bristol stool chart. And doctors have devised over time different types of stools and what they tell you about your health. This is something that we in America don't take, to consideration, and it's important to understand what the different type of stool forms will tell you about your health. This book goes into great detail about it and can tell you and give you suggestions on how to change your lifestyle to get a healthy bowel movement so that it's between 18 and 24 hours and in the right form and getting the right bacteria inside your gut. All these things are important. And in this book, I share with you all those things, and it's free. This is a free ebook. So all you have to do is go to my Facebook group at the Other Side of Medicine, join the Facebook group, send me a message in the Facebook group, and I will send out this book to you absolutely free. This is a life-changing book. It will help you and your family members out of a lot of discomfort and trouble that could loom in the future if you don't get good digestion and elimination. Okay, my friends, well, we have run out of time, and tonight we missed Pastor Lawson, but he will be back next week, I'm certain. He had some problems with his iPad, his computer tonight, and we normally have him say a prayer, but I'm going to go ahead and say a closing prayer this evening, and I hope that you join in with me. So as we pray always in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, Heavenly Father, we come to you, and we ask, Lord, that you would bless everybody that was here tonight. Bless the people so that they would take this knowledge and begin to apply it in their lives so that they would become better stewards of the temple that you have provided. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Okay, my friends, until next week, may the good Lord bless you. May the good Lord shine his light upon you. Until then, ciao for now.